It was one of those evenings when tempers were simmering quietly beneath the surface of everyday life in a modest apartment complex. The kind of place where the walls were too thin, the parking spaces too few, and the tenants too used to each other's business. The night of December 10th, 2013 would turn out to be far from ordinary. By the time the sun had gone down, a simple parking issue would explode into a small storm of accusations, dented metal, and the sharp edge of Judge Judy's no-nonsense courtroom. Terry Argo had lived in that complex long enough to get irritated by her neighbor's habits. To her, Carissa Hartung was the kind of tenant who didn't care where she parked. Her big truck often blocked others, and it had become a daily nuisance. That evening, Terry was driving her old 2003 Oldsmobile Alero, her daughter Jenna sitting in the passenger seat. She was only taking Jenna and her fiancé to a movie, just a short drive, nothing dramatic. But as Terry backed out of her space, Jenna shouted, "Stop! The truck's there again?" It was Carissa's truck, parked in the wrong spot as usual, in Terry's view. Terry braked hard, checked the space, maneuvered carefully, and drove off. She dropped the kids at the theater, turned around and headed home, still fuming about that truck. When she pulled back into the lot, it was dark and cold. Instead of going inside, she decided she'd had enough. For months she'd complained to the landlord, texting and calling about Carissa's parking. But nothing changed. That night, she told herself, she was going to confront the problem directly. So she marched next door to talk to Carissa, a neighbor she had never spoken to before. Terry claimed later that she wasn't angry, just frustrated. But the truth was, she'd had it with that truck. On the other side of the wall, Carissa and her fiancé, Darius Rankins, were just settling in. They'd moved into their apartment only a week earlier, still unpacking boxes, trying to make the place feel like home. Around 8:30 or 9:00 that night, Darius heard a knock on the door. When he opened it, a woman stood there, someone he'd never met. It was Terry Argo. Her expression was uneasy, her tone blunt. "I just hit the truck," she said. Darius blinked, unsure if he'd heard her right. "What truck?" he asked. "Carissa's truck," she replied. He stepped outside with her to take a look. Under the dim light of the parking lot, he saw it. A dent on the side of Carissa's truck. Terry's Alero was parked close by, and there was no mistaking it. She must have clipped it. Darius went back inside and told Carissa what happened. When she came out and saw the damage for herself, her anger flared instantly. That truck was her pride and joy, the one thing she'd worked hard to buy and keep in good shape. She demanded to see Terry's insurance information. Terry hesitated, fumbled, and finally admitted she didn't have the insurance card with her. Things only got worse when Carissa tried calling the insurance company and learned there was no valid policy under Terry's name. In the courtroom months later, the air was tense as Judge Judy listened to both sides. Her sharp tone sliced through the confusion. "Miss Argo, I'm going to start with you," she said, leaning forward. "Your car was moving, hers was parked. That's not complicated." Terry tried to explain, tried to say there was no contact, that she only went next door to talk about parking, not because of any accident. But Judy wasn't buying it. "You dropped your daughter off at the movie," she pressed. "You came home. What did you do then?" Terry stumbled through her story, trying to stay calm under the judge's piercing stare. "I went next door to talk to Carissa," she said. "About her parking." Judy's eyes narrowed. "And how many times before had you gone next door to talk to her?" she asked. "None," Terry admitted. "So on the one day your cars supposedly didn't touch, you suddenly decided to go knock on her door. A neighbor you'd never spoken to before?" Judy leaned back, smirking slightly. "You get where I'm going, right?" Carissa, when called to testify, told her side clearly. Her truck had been parked while she was moving things into the apartment. She hadn't seen the accident herself, but Darius had. He backed her up completely, explaining how Terry came to their door, confessed to hitting the truck, and then downplayed the damage as just a little dent. When Judy asked about insurance, Terry's story started to unravel. She said the car was insured but admitted the policy wasn't in her name. It was under her ex-fiancé's. And there was a restraining order, so she couldn't get the paperwork. That was all Judy needed to hear. She leaned forward, tapping her pen against the bench. "You can wide-eye me all you like," she snapped. "But I've been doing this for 20 years. You can save yourself a lot of humiliation if you just tell the truth." Terry stammered, insisting the car was covered. "Show me!" Judy demanded. Terry couldn't. The courtroom fell silent except for the rustle of papers as Carissa handed over the repair estimate. The total was $2,098. Not an outrageous number, but enough to sting. Judge Judy didn't need to deliberate long. Her voice was final, cutting through the tension with absolute authority. "Judgment for the plaintiff in the amount of $2,098. That's all." The sound of her gavel was sharp, echoing off the walls as Bird, the bailiff, motioned for both parties to leave. Outside the courtroom, Carissa and Darius were relieved. Justice, in their eyes, had been served. They'd been honest, consistent, and unshaken under pressure. For Terry, though, the walk out of the studio felt heavy. She muttered about how unfair it was, about how Judge Judy hadn't listened. But deep down, she knew that the judge had seen through her, seen the contradictions, the hesitation, the excuses. In the end, what had started as a small parking dispute turned into a lesson in accountability. The courtroom wasn't a place for stories or half-truths. It was a place for facts. Judge Judy, with her decades of sharp intuition, could spot dishonesty from a mile away. For her, it wasn't just about the dent in a truck. It was about integrity, about owning up to mistakes no matter how small. That December night might have ended in scratches and frustration, but it exposed something far more important than a bent fender. It revealed how pride, denial, and stubbornness could spiral into something bigger when honesty was left out of the equation. And for everyone watching, the verdict was a reminder of why Judge Judy's courtroom had lasted so long. Because in a world full of excuses, truth still mattered.